good information in here for us that will help guide your final preparations leading into London and then, of course, in London. So I'm going to just get straight through to the outline for the session tonight, and then we'll get straight into the speakers. So, Peter, if you could just go to the outline for me. So as you can see from the information that I sent out in terms of who we have tonight, we've got some really reputable people that have given up their time, and I know that you're also very thankful, like myself, to them to do this. But it's really key information that I thought was quite relevant as we lead into London. And as you can see, we have a number of people from our board, which is fantastic. Chad from V Insurance, so he will answer all our insurance questions. And of course, Kieran Barry, who's one of our National Talent Academy coaches and will offer a wealth of information in terms of preparation. So thank you for being along. I'm now going to hand over to Peter Downs, who's our facilitator for this evening, and Peter will walk you through the webinar and how it all works. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Katie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Downs, and my job's pretty easy this evening. I just have to press the right buttons, make sure we're on time, and to facilitate this webinar through to its conclusion. I think we'll go till about 9 o'clock-ish, I think, as well. Now, one thing we want to do is to encourage you as much as possible to ask questions live in this webinar. We'll have a question and answer session right at the end. It's pretty simple to ask a question on a webinar if it's the first time. You should have a control panel on your screen, and there's a questions box there. Simply type in the questions and press the send button. That will come to myself and Katie there. So just press your questions, put your questions in there, press the send button, and at the end of the webinar, we'll certainly be addressing those. If we don't get a chance to address all your questions, then we will do post the webinar anyway. So we will receive your questions. So if we don't get the time this evening for your questions, we will get to it though post the webinar. So please do send them in. We did have some questions come in before the webinar as well. So that's good. Okay, without further ado, our first speaker, I'll introduce Mr. Kieran Barry. Let me just unmute Kieran for you so we can you hear me, Kieran?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Peter.
Excellent. Well, I'll press the buttons this end, Kieran, if you want to take it from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Peter. Well, first of all, welcome to everyone, and congratulations on being selected for the Australian team. It's a big honour, as you all know, and I'm sure you've worked incredibly hard to get there, and I hope you have a great experience and a great race in London. A little bit tough to sort of give you guys guidelines because I know some of you are incredibly experienced and others are a bit less experienced, but what I'm going to try and do is just give you some general outlines of the way you should be preparing for the race, just based on my experience of travelling to Europe for a lot of years for races. So realistically, if it's a bit too basic for you, I apologise for that, because I know all you guys are obviously very good athletes, having made it to the national team, but hopefully we cover everything, and if there's any more detail you need, feel free to ask a question and we'll hopefully get to that at the end. Okay, Peter, can we go to the next slide, or the first slide? Because I'm sick of looking at myself. A bit scary, that picture. Okay, so tapering, as I said, you've all tapered for races, you're all experienced with it, and you all should have your own taper routine that you pretty much follow. General rule of thumb is, as it said there, about 50% of normal volume. Intensity, keep that the same, and the frequency of your training should be kept the same as well. So basically what you're looking to do in that last week is shorter efforts with longer recovery periods, so that you're doing some fast work without overexerting. Okay, now the complexity that comes into tapering for an international race is much greater, because extended travel and the time changes, they're going to place really big demands on your body, and if you haven't done it before, you are definitely going to notice a difference. You've got to allow yourself extra time on the run in to taper, to wind down your training, and you're going to have to allow yourself extra time on the way once you get there to get back to your best. So what that means, obviously some of you are leaving early, some of you are leaving late, so that makes, you know, it pretty difficult to give exact guidelines. But think of it this way: if you travel in a fatigue state, right, you're going to significantly extend the time it takes you to recover. Travel like this puts massive stress on the immune system. So if you travel fatigued, your immune system's depressed further, your risk of picking up something on the plane is significantly increased, and your risk of getting something when you get there, because your immune system's going to be really depressed for a few days, goes up greatly as well. And so it's really important that you err on the side of caution in the final 3 days. Okay, so those final 3 days, my recommendation would be don't do anything intense. Now, you should have done all that stuff before. I mean, if you're going to race well in London, the last 3 days before you go shouldn't really matter. One session, hard session here or there, isn't going to make a big difference on a positive note, but it could make a massive difference on a negative note. Okay? When you are the last day before you go, if it's possible, it's always good to do a really light session. I normally try and get our athletes to just have a light swim before they go, if that's possible. Okay, and it will just help you feel more relaxed on the flight. Whereas conversely, if you do a hard session, you're just going to be sore on the flight. So, as I said, just take it easy. And a big rule of thumb: if you're feeling flat in that last week before you go, back it off even more than you would in your normal taper. Okay. All right, Peter, can I have the next slide, please? Peter's probably fallen asleep.
No, yeah, it just takes a little time there.
Yeah, sorry, mate. All right. I think it's important. Okay, so when you're traveling to Europe, think about, you know, what you're putting your body through, and think about the fatigue level you're going to face. Okay, so the last 2 nights before you go, what most of us tend to do is try and get as much work done as humanly possible, because we're taking a break from work, so we tend to work, most age groupers in my experience will tend to work about 18 hours a day in those last 2 days, which is the biggest mistake you can make. You want to get a couple of good nights sleep. Okay, with your food, follow your normal eating pattern, but remember, because you're cutting down in training, you don't want to be eating too much. Okay, so back that off a little bit. Right? On your way to the airport, make sure that you have a good drink on the way there, and hold on 1 second. Make sure you have a good drink on the way there, but remember, you have to have your water bottle finished, because they won't let you get it through customs. Okay. Once you're at the airport, try not to sit for too long. It's not a great idea to sit for a long time when you're going to get on a plane for a long time. Now, a flight bag is really important. Okay, so obviously you've got your empty water bottle, and then in your toiletries, your normal toiletries, deodorant, etc. You don't want to stink all the other people off the plane, but think about the dehydration factor. So lip balm, moisturizer, eye drops, 3 critically important things. The next, equally important, are good quality earplugs. You're going to Europe, don't save $2 on buying cheap and nasty earplugs. Get the best ones you can before you go. A good eye mask and a neck pillow. If you're lucky enough to be in business class or first class, well, I hate you, but apart from that, you probably don't need them. But anyone who's traveling up the back of the bus, neck pillows are really important. And the other really critical thing is compression socks. Okay, not tights, because you want your ankles to be looked after as well. Okay. Once you're on the plane, adjust your watch to European time, not Singapore time or wherever it is you're stopping over. Adjust it to European time. Be aware of what the time is for your stopover, but more important, European time. You want to start thinking in that mindset instantly. Okay, you're 8 hours back from when you actually get on. Get an aisle seat so you can get up and move around as much as you can. Right. And make sure you, because I want you drinking a lot, make sure you're going to be going to the toilet a lot, so walk a little extra, and spend some time stretching. Okay. The other thing you should have in your carry-on bag is some snacks that you like, because you want to eat frequently, and you don't want to be forced to eat the airline food that you, in all likelihood, are probably going to hate. But you want to eat things that you like. You don't want to eat too much at once. You just want to eat lightly and regularly. Okay. Now, depending on what time of day you're flying, make sure you're careful with your food choices. Protein, so we all know, meat, nuts, all those sort of things. Chicken, fish, they're all going to help you stay awake. Carbs, pastas, for example, are going to help you sleep. Okay. Drink regularly. All right, so you want to make sure that every time you go to the bathroom, check your urine color. If it's getting darker, drink more. Okay. Now, I've based this on the next point, stay awake on the first flight, for those people who are leaving in the afternoon, which tends to be the majority of flights from Australia. Okay, you're going to be leaving in the afternoon, you're going to get tired, you're going to want to sleep. Don't. Okay, remember, it's 8 hours earlier where you're headed. So you really want to make sure that first bit you stay awake, because that's the first step in getting used to the time. Okay, next one, please. I'll keep going while we're waiting. But once you if you've got to stop over in Asia, once again, I'm making that assumption. Okay, if you've got specific questions about other flights, just send them to me at the end. All right. With your Asian layer, avoid caffeine, because you should be planning to sleep on the next flight. Keep drinking water. Now, if you go to Singapore, Changi Airport has a really good pool and gym. If you can get a swim in, it would be the best thing in the world. It doesn't have to be hard. It's a small pool, but just a few laps is going to make you feel significantly better. Okay. Once you're on the next flight, keep your fluid intake up. Okay. But then about 90 minutes before you plan to sleep, cut it back. And I can't spell minutes, I've just read. But about 90 minutes before you plan to sleep, drop the water back, because you want to go to sleep hydrated but with an empty bladder, so you get a full night's sleep, or as close to as possible. Okay. And so for this one, take the carbohydrate off option. Okay. Ideally, assuming, as I said, you've taken the afternoon flight from Sydney, eat, read, watch a movie, good night. All right. Make sure you put your earplugs in and your eye mask. You want the quality of sleep you get when it's dark is significantly greater than when it's light. When you wake up, protein option. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Once you get to London, if you arrive in the morning, it's really important that you stay awake. As soon as you can get off the plane, if you can get some light exercise done, that's fantastic, and start eating your meals at London times. Okay. Get outdoors, as I said, good luck trying to get some sunlight in London. You never know, you could be lucky, but the more you can get your body into that time zone, the better. Sunlight plays a critical factor in that. Okay? You want to try and get out of the sun, like the light, once it's hitting sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and you've still got a bit of daylight left in London at that time, but just head indoors then, okay, and start to wind down, getting your body ready to sleep at that stage. Remember, you're going to be really tired during that first day, but don't worry about it, just put up with it. Okay. The most critical thing though is when you get there, sometimes you'll feel fantastic. Don't let that fool you. It's going to take you a few days to get back to yourself, to your best. So listen to your body over that first few days, and just give yourself 3 days of aerobic training just to get back into it. Okay, Go and head over the course, have a good look at the course, get an idea of it, but just don't push yourself in training. Just let your body get back to its best. It will, but it will take a bit of time. Okay, the final point on equipment is about equipment selection. Now, the first point there, I've seen a lot of people at Worlds and Olympics and things like that who've tried new things because we all want that edge for the big race. I've never heard of anyone having success with it. Okay, I've seen some incredible disasters from people trying new things. That's not the time to do it. Okay? The best advice I can give you is just to do what you do at home. Okay, the course in London, in terms of wheels, the sprint course I don't think suits a disc. There's quite a lot of turns where you're going to have to accelerate the wheel back up. So unless you're really strong, you're really used to it, I'd probably go with a deep rim as an alternative. Remember, critically important for London, it's probably going to be wet. Okay, so don't make the mistake that some of our athletes made in London and put slicks on. That extra 5 seconds can be the difference between not finishing your race or finishing it 5 seconds later is a much better option. Okay, look, I know that's a very quick summary and there'll probably be plenty of questions, but I'm more than happy to answer those at the end or after the webinar. Okay, thank you, and over to you, Peter.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Very good, very good. We'll move straight on. There'll be chances for questions right at the end, so please do keep your questions coming in. Jackie, let me just unmute you. Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks very much, Peter. Welcome, everybody. Can I first say, just before I get underway, congratulations on making the World Age Group team in whichever race you're competing in. I have done one World Championship myself, and it is loads of fun if you've never done it before, and I can imagine it's even more exciting if you're going back again or defending a title. So I have been I'm a very ranked back of the packer that's been out there playing on the field of play for 29 years as a triathlete and 22 years as a technical official. So I just want to touch on a couple of things. If I can have the next slide, please, Peter. And Katie has very kindly given me a few prompters here. I think the sorts of questions that have been coming in the months leading up to London. And I think of all of the areas in your preparation or how you behave at the event, I personally believe, as I said, and having worked both sides of the fence, that this is the one area where you have the greatest control over the outcome. If you obey the rules, you won't have any issues. It's really sort of quite that simple. So I'm going to run through a couple of things. I mean, how do I best prepare for the World Championships? My recommendation to that is to download the ITU competition rules. There's 46 pages, and I think you've got about 15 hours on the plane. Some very worthwhile reading. For those of you privileged enough to have sponsors needing to be added to your uniform, there are guidelines in the rules as well for that, and I would imagine that you've already accessed those or contacted Katie with any questions on that area. In terms of do they really check my bike tri-suit and helmet and everything, there will be, what I can honestly say is that there will be a full complement of officials. For anyone that was at Gold Coast in 2009, we had 54 officials, and I can't imagine London would have any less. How they specifically check everything, whether they check every single person or check select individuals or check with team managers, I can't answer that question. Again, I think if you've complied by the rules, you absolutely have nothing to worry about. How strictly will the drafting rule be implemented compared to your events in Australia? I think, again, it's extremely simple, at least it is for me with my simple mind, and that is those two magic words, World Championships. So my expectation of what will happen over there, of course, depending on conditions and safety, is that the officials would apply the rules to the highest level, as I said, dependent upon conditions and what's happening on the field of play. Okay, we'll touch on a couple of the different rules and everything in a minute, and as I said, the rules can be found on the ITU website, www.triathlon.org. That will come up on a later slide, and a very worthwhile, fairly dry but worthwhile read. If I could have the next slide, Peter. There we go. So there we go. There's the website. So when you go to it, it's always fun to find it if you've never been to this particular section. So when you go to the website, click on the documents section. In the documents section, that little box off to the right, when you click on the rules, will come up with all of those documents as well. Now, the competition rules also include the uniform rules, so you don't have to download multiple documents. And what I've just highlighted in the box below at the bottom of this slide is when I click on competition rules, there's actually 3 documents. They've now removed the old 2012 rules. And what you'll find is the complete rules, all 137 pages, and the rule changes from 2012 to 2013, which I think may be more relevant to those that have gone to a World Championship before. Next slide. So what I wanted to just touch on is a couple of things that are specifically different with the ITU competition rules. The water temperature cutoff for wetsuits is different. It's 22 for age groupers, whereas of course in Australia it's 24. I think it's going to be freeze your butt off weather in London anyway, so I'm sure you'll all be wearing wetsuits. You'll find those, and there are time limits for the swim. For example, in the Olympic distance, the maximum time allowed in the water is 1 hour and 10 minutes. And this is obviously to ensure that the event finishes in a timely fashion. But I can't imagine that anybody hopefully has too many worries with that. But you'll find all of those details on page 17 of the rules. A couple of little things that I've combined, which you'll find on page 19. So the swim cap that you'll be provided. So any of the gear that you're given, please use it. I don't know that I've heard of too many Australians ever being penalised at a world, so I'm sure you don't want to be the first. Tri-suits, and again, I know you've got your Australian uniforms, but just so you know that they can't have any neoprene sections in them, and if for some reason you wear 2, if you weren't wearing a wetsuit for whatever reason, they both have to fully comply. So when you peel one off, it looks exactly the same. Wetsuits must fit the body tightly. So some of those rocket science sport wetsuits with the flaps and things like that on them are not allowed in ITU events, and actually, or in Triathlon Australia events anymore either. Next slide, Pete. In terms of the bike, it's really quite simple. And again, rather than spending all night on this, we've all only got a small amount of time for our sections. UCI time trial rules apply for non-drafting bike specifications. You'll find them on page 22. I would suggest you would familiarise yourself with that if you are particularly lucky to have extremely nice cycling gear. Probably the biggest difference you'll notice though is the draft zone, and anybody doing long course will be used to 12 metres. For those mainly doing Olympic distance, 12 metres, it's about the size of a minibus, or you can pretty much put 2 full-size sedans end to end. So it is very, very large. You've got 20 seconds to pass through that zone, and you've got 5 seconds to drop back. So if somebody passes you and drops in front of you, which is always annoying, you have 5 seconds to drop out of that zone. And bear that in mind, that 12 metres is a long way to drop out, and 5 seconds is not a very long time to get out of that. A couple of, in terms of the new rules brought in, particularly in 2013, where the wetsuit and the tri-suit changes in terms of the neoprenes and the neoprene and flaps on wetsuits. And the other thing that I noticed in the change document that I thought may be relevant if by chance you're racking your bike by the handlebars, they now must be racked by both handlebars if you're forward racking. And again, I'm not sure. I know Murray's going to give you a great brief of the course and some of the details after being at the Olympics last year, so he may have some insight on that. And as I said, please, this is where you can download the rules. Next slide. That was just a summary of a couple of the points that we've been through. If anybody has any questions, I know Katie's compiling those. And I believe that should be it for me, Peter.
Yep. Yeah. What we're going to do, Jackie, there. I might unmute Katie right now.
Yes.
So, Katie, do you want to unmute yourself there? Let me just try. There you go.
Yeah,
Katie, if we've got some questions coming in, I believe we do. Katie.
Yeah, we do. Jackie, thank you for that. We've just got some really good questions that have come through. The first one is, are SMP bike saddles ITU legal?
Look, I'm not familiar with that specific seat. Again, if somebody does have particularly sophisticated gear, I would be going to the UCI UCI website and checking the compliance. Again, the bike needs to be time trial legal under UCI specifications, so I would go and have a look.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not a bike expert, I'm afraid.
Sorry, thanks, Jackie. The next one is there any basis that a bike will be quarantined coming back into Australia?
Not as far as I know. I've certainly travelled with my bike all around the world. Maybe don't go off-roading through a farm with lots of cow poo, but not as far as I know. If the conditions in London are particularly grubby and grimy, I would just wipe the bike down. But certainly I've travelled to many countries with my bike and I've never had a problem with it being quarantined.
Yep. Can you wear 2 swim caps?
If you wear 2 swim caps, your second swim cap must be underneath the competition swim cap. So the competition swim cap must be on the outside. So yeah, if you're worried about being cold, then your personal swim cap must be underneath the competition swim cap.
Okay, another couple of questions, Jackie. Are compression socks able to be worn?
Let me look at the clothing guidelines on that.
While you're looking at that, Jackie, I might just throw this one at you. Can you rack your bike by the saddle?
Again, I don't know the design of the transition area. I don't know anything about how that is laid out. So that's really, as I said, Murray may be able to answer that because it often is event specific for that.
Okay, we'll put Murray on notice for that one for the next bit.
Yeah.
Another good question here, given that there's going to be a significant amount of athletes on the course at any one time, a question is how do we maintain a 12-metre drafting rule when the course is going to be packed? Is there any sort of tips that you could offer there, Jackie?
Look, I think the best thing, I do Noosa every year. This will be my 15th Noosa every year, so I know what everybody means about a packed course. The best thing that you can do, and it's what I do every year, is as much as possible, one of the things that the officials will be looking for is are you deliberately trying to move forward and get out of that draft zone and make a very, very conscious and obvious effort? And by the same token, if you've decided that you need to drop out, then the same rule applies. Like if you're really, really trying to drop out doesn't just mean sitting up and stretching your back. It may mean actually putting the brakes on and consciously showing I'm trying to get out, particularly if somebody happens to drop in front of you while you're trying to drop out of you're trying to drop out of a draft zone of somebody that's just passed you, and then you're halfway through dropping out and you're 6 metres back and somebody else drops in. And obviously you've got another 5 seconds, but I can imagine that's going to be frustrating for some of the athletes if the course is going to be congested and depending on what the wave starts are. But that's what I've found is if you are very obviously trying to do the right thing, trying not to block, trying not to draft, you know, you're not jumping on somebody's wheel or anything like that, then hopefully you should be pretty safe.
Okay, and just the final one. There's a couple of other questions you've posted, guys, and we'll get the answers to you on those. And Jackie, we can take this one on notice about compression socks.
Yeah, I'll check on the compression socks because, yeah, I just need to check whether if it's not part of your uniform, whether it's allowed at a World Champs. That's more than what I'm concerned about. So, yeah, I'd rather respond to that on email.
Yeah, of course. And just in the interest of time, I'll just ask one final question because I know it's been talked about a fair bit on the Facebook side. I've been told that we'll be riding on the right-hand side, opposite side of the road to where we do in Australia. Does this mean anyone passes on the left-hand side?
Now, again, this is where it's so critical, and it's a great question, and I knew it was going to come up because I lived in Canada for so long. One of the really important sections of the rules to read is the cycling section on conduct. And in that, it actually details that the athlete may occupy any position on the course because at an ITU event, they recognise that some courses are going to be on the left-hand side of the road and some are going to be on the right-hand side of the road. So it's really, really important that, again, the main thing is to avoid the drafting and also follow any specific instructions. That's what will happen when they get over there is that there will be a briefing for the team managers. So what's really important for everybody when they get over there is when the team manager comes back from the briefing by the technical delegate, don't miss that briefing because anything specific to the event will be given out in that particular briefing. So that's critical.
Great. Well, look, thank you very much, Jackie, and thank you for everyone who's posted some questions. As I mentioned, there's a few here, so we'll certainly get the answers to those in the next few days and have them up on the website along with the presentation. So thanks, Jackie.
Thanks a lot.
And
good luck, everybody. Have an awesome time in London.
Thanks, Jackie. And Peter, I'll hand back to you for the next presenter. Great
stuff. Thanks, Katie and Jackie. We'll move straight on to Mr. Murray. Hilda, let me just press a couple of buttons here and unmute Murray to see if you can hear me. Can you hear me, Murray?
Yep, Murray's on.
Excellent. If you want to speak up, Murray, a little bit muffled there, but the stage is yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Yep, that's me that you can see. I was fortunate enough to be in London last year for the Olympic Games, so hopefully I can provide you a little bit of intel in terms of the course and I guess the forecast environment in London. Naturally, it was around about this time last year when we had the Olympic Games, so I can give you a little bit of data in terms of what the conditions were at the time, and as Kieran mentioned, you know, London weather can be a little bit unpredictable, so you know, hopefully that the conditions will be the same as last year, which was I guess really good racing conditions for both the men and the women. So hopefully you'll get the same as well. So just on to the next slide. What I'll do is I'll go through the aquathon course, naturally in accordance to the program. There'll be the aquathon, and then we'll have the sprint and the standard distance, or what most of us in Australia refer to as the Olympic distance. For the aquathon, it's likely to be a 1K swim and a 5K run. Very simple course. It's a course that almost follows the swim and the run course from the Olympic Games. So we follow off with a 1K swim, which is going from the pontoon within the serpentine. In terms of the anticipated water temperature, I can only really go off what we had for the Olympic Games last year. And like during the women's, it was 19.8 degrees, and for the men, it was 20.3. So very much likely it's going to be a wetsuit swim for the age groupers. And if you can just go on to the next slide. So for the 1K swim, it's just one simple lap in an anti-clockwise direction, and for the aquathon, it's 2 laps of a 5K run. So a couple of little tips there for the guys and girls that are going to be in the aquathon. Basically, the transition area will be downwards adjacent to the elite transition area. For those of you that may have watched the Olympic Games, it's a fairly large open park area where the main venue will be. And as you're looking at the serpentine from the venue, the transition area will be downwards on the left-hand side, or if you're coming out of the water, you'll come out of the pontoon and then make a right-hand turn. The program as such, there is some information available on the event website, and if you follow the links through triathlon.org and you follow the World Triathlon Series, and then click on London, and then there's various links there as well that'll get you, to the various pages for the aquathon, the elite races, to the age group races, the para triathlon. There's a race information booklet, and so hence we'd recommend that you download that and you have a really good read, because it'll give you a better description than what I can do probably in 10 minutes. But just a couple of tips, and this is not just for the aquathon and the sprint and those in the Olympic distance race. So what the ITU do is they set up the swim course so the first buoy is positioned roughly 2/3 and 1/3 from the pontoon. So, and they've done that historically so that one particular side doesn't have an advantage. And roughly it's that kind of 1/3 distance in from the furthest end of the pontoon. So if you can get yourself in, roughly to that first third distance in from the end of the pontoon, you'll be directly in front of the first buoy, and you'll have a very minor, I guess, advantage in terms of just having that straight line to the first buoy. So when you're lining up,
sorry,
sure
Murray, could I just jump in? Could I jump in, Murray? Just see if you can speak up a little bit muffled. That's all. If you can speak up, I'll get a bit closer to the to the computer there.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So hopefully that's a bit better. So if you're lining up, just let a couple of people go through, and then get yourself into that first third distance onto that pontoon, and then you'll be directly off. Now it'll be a deep water start for all of the age group races. So ensure you've got one hand on the pontoon. It's a very simple start procedure, similar to previous years. It's just on your marks, and then it's just a horn. Basically, the protocol is that there's very minimal delay between when on your mark is activated, and it'll be just somebody with a microphone as such, and then the horn will go off. So just be wary of that. All the buoys, in terms of where you've got to turn on your around to the left, you keep them on your left hand shoulder, and then as you're coming back towards the pontoon, there'll be a red buoy, so you turn right at the red buoys, and then left again at the last yellow before you come back onto the pontoon. There'll be a ramp, and then you make your way out onto the transition area. You need to ensure that you don't stop. As you're coming out of the water, you can't stop and take your wetsuit off and then run that 300 metres distance. You can only take your wetsuit off as you come into the transition area. Make sure you take your race belt with you as well. If a race number is provided, you need to wear it during the run. And of course, make sure you can count 2 laps. In terms of the run course itself, it's pretty flat. In some later slides, I've got some elevation diagrams which I can give you, but in terms of the lowest point to the highest point, it's not more than 10 metres. So it's not a particularly undulating course, but it's flat and it's fast. So just on to the next slide. Thanks, Peter. Okay, so for the sprint race, it's essentially just half of the Olympic distance course. That distance to the first buoy will be the same. So the buoys that are stationed out towards the Serpentine Bridge, they'll be basically the same for every course. For the aquaphone and for the standard distance, so there's no change there. But of course, the back end of the Serpentine course will be changed to suit. But again, all the left-hand turns.
Are you getting very faint there, Murray? If you can try and get a bit closer for us.
Okay, so all the left-hand turns again will be yellow buoys, and then you're back into the pontoon. Now, in terms of the water temperature, I wouldn't anticipate that the temperature is going to fluctuate all that much between events. So again, you're looking at that 19, 20 degrees water temperature. Now, for the bike course, again, it's flat and it's fast. And just to, I guess, answer one of the questions previously that may have come up in terms of how you can rack your bike. If the traditional standard A-frames are going to be used, which I'd say is 99% likelihood that's going to occur, you can have your bike racked by your saddle for the first transition. And then as you come back in for the second transition, you can rack your bike by the handlebars. Okay, and that's specifically written in accordance to Rule 7.1, which is on page 29. So just make a note of that. Make sure you read that on your flight when you're going over. Now, the bike course is 3 laps. Again, very flat and fast. Elevation is not all that much, and again, I've got that on some later slides. Just a point to note: there's only one penalty box on the bike course, so just make note of that. And you need to stop when you're given a penalty. Make sure that you stop whilst you're out on the bike course, and you stop when you approach. So if you get given a yellow card and you make it somewhere out on the course, and then as you're approaching the penalty box, my recommendation is to stop on the lap that you are on. Do not go past it, and do not wait until you see your penalty on the run course. Now, the details in the race information booklet, from what I've noticed, are very, very phasey. And hence I would keep an eye out for the briefing information, as Jackie mentioned before, that once the briefing is made, it'll be uploaded onto the triathlon.org website, and that should be confirmed. But there is only one penalty box. Of course, you do not go along Serpentine Road on each lap. There is a turnaround just before the Queen Elizabeth Gate, which you'll turn around and then make out for the next bike lap. So you do not go down Serpentine Road. You only come out from transition, and then as you're going back into transition, you'll travel along Serpentine Road. For the run course, of course, it's 2 laps, almost, if in fact identical to the aquathon course. There'll be 2 aid stations out there as well for that. If you can go to the next slide, thanks, Peter. So for the standard or the Olympic distance course, the swim course is basically identical to what we had at the Olympic Games. The swim buoys, again, will be yellow on the left, and then the last buoy on the right will be red, and then straight line into the pontoon. Approximately 300 metres as you come out of the water into the transition, and then you'll make your way out onto the bike course. Now, the bike course is broken up into 2 parts, more or less. You've got, I guess, the first half of the segment on one end, which is almost identical to the sprint course, but then you've got the other back end, which goes all the way out to the Tower Bridge. And I can say it's a fantastic and probably one of the most scenic courses you could ever have in a triathlon. Yeah, very envious of those of you who'll be going out there on the course for that. It's 2 laps on the bike, each lap approximately 20 k's, and then there's 3 laps on the run. But if you just make a note of the run course, folks, because we won't come back to this slide, but it has extensions on it, marginally different compared to the aquathon and the sprint courses. There's 3 aid stations rather than 2 compared to the aquathon and sprint distance. So if you can go on to that next course, thanks, Peter. Next slide, thanks, Peter. The details as such for those of you that want to get full details of all the names of the streets and everything are available on the race information website. But that's the other back end. So you'll come from the venue or from Hyde Park, you're out and around Buckingham Palace, down past towards Westminster Abbey, across and then long up to Charing Cross, and then following down along to the Thames, up towards the Tower Bridge, and then all the way back, coming back through the Charing Cross, back along the Mall, up towards Buckingham Palace. It almost sounds like a history lesson. It's a fantastic course. And then, as I say, you don't go back onto Serpentine Road. You'll follow down around through South Carriage Drive, back up to the other end of Hyde Park, and then you turn around at the top of Hyde Park, which is on the Piccadilly end. So yeah, just make a note in terms of that you're able to count those laps, and of course you do not go down through Serpentine Road. Just ensure that you just keep on passing go, as they say, and you're back out and around for your second lap. So just on to the next slide. Thanks, Peter. So for the next slide, there's just a couple of little tips here that I've noted based on what had occurred last year. Obviously, having an Olympic Games in an age group race can be a little bit different, but based on the magnitude of the event, there won't be any swim warm-up. But if you do want to go and test the Serpentine waters, the water will be fit for swimming conditions. The ITU have a fairly rigorous regime where they have the water tested on a certain frequency, and there's been aeration cells kind of bubbling through the Serpentine just to control the blue-green algae that sometimes has occurred there. But I can guarantee that the water will be good for swimming, but there won't be any swim warm-up before your event. If you do want to test the waters, on the other side of the Serpentine, so that's on the Royal Albert Hall side of the Serpentine, there's a very old cafe there called the Lido Cafe, and you can have a bit of a swim in there. It's been all netted off and everything, but it'll be on the basis of first come, first served, type regime. Naturally, there'll be thousands of competitors, and it's only a netted off area of about 100 metres by 50 metres or so. So try and get in there early and have a bit of a roll of the arms if you're really keen, but nothing too strenuous, as what Kieran had mentioned before. Ensure you start in the correct wave. If you start in the wrong wave, that may render a disqualification. Because you may be, wanting to pace off, someone in a different age group for whatever particular reason. So in accordance to the rules, you need to ensure that you start in the correct wave. and there will be a corral system where there will be announcements, and there will be 3 stages of corrals, similar to previous World Championships, where you'll move through and then onto the pontoon. Start procedure will be the same as what we described for the aquathon. So be on your marks and then off. And again, that little tip is at 2/3, 1/3. There's no allocated pontoon position or anything for age groupers. It's basically as you move on. So you can go to that next slide. Thanks, Peter. And just for those of you that might want to get a little bit of an edge out, that first distance to the turn buoy will be about just short of 300 metres. So for the bike course, as I mentioned before, it's predominantly flat. There's a couple of little slight inclines, and I'll just go through those a little bit later. But essentially, we've just got a little bit of an uphill section, which is on that corner of West Carriage Drive as you turn back in towards the Serpentine Bridge. And there's some little slight hill sections down near the Tower Bridge end, but nothing really too strenuous. One other little tip that I've just kind of picked up, having been based in London, visited London a couple of times, or luckily enough. The road surface is predominantly bitumen, but a lot of the roads in London are heritage listed, and over a couple of 100 years ago, when they built the roads, they used a garnet aggregate, and so it looks like the roads are like a crimson kind of pinkish colour, and if it's wet, that garnet is very slippery. And also the aggregate is kind of lifted a little bit on top of the bitumen, so hence, that the contact area between your tyre and the road itself can be quite minimum. So if it's wet, just kind of take your time in terms of whenever you're going around those corners. The first corner you'll get next to the Queen's Gates is where the garnet aggregate is. For those of you that watched the Olympics, there's a section just on the other side of Hyde Park Corner, which during the elite races they've nicknamed Crash Corner. It's got garnet there as well. Plus, there's some oak trees, and the oak trees have a full canopy across the road, and the oil from the leaves will then get onto the road and it'll become quite slippery. So just be wary of any kind of laid up water if there's a full canopy of trees on certain sections of the course, and just take your time, save that time so you can get through and finish the race. All the U-turns are wide. As I mentioned before, if you receive a yellow card, make sure you stop at the penalty box. Don't leave it to the last lap, and there will be no penalty boxes for bike infringements on the run course. There are no mobile mechanics out on the course for any of the events. And if you happen to withdraw for whatever reason, either medical or mechanical, please make sure you make an attempt to see a marshal. Don't just kind of pick yourself up and then walk your way off to the hotel, because everyone needs to be accounted for. As I mentioned before, the run courses are predominantly flat. There's a slight little downhill as you come back around in towards the venue. There's a little downhill, I guess, left-hand turn as you'll head towards the finish. You'll actually run past the finish, and then you've got to make a U-turn to come back in. It'll be the same finish for all the events, including the elite. So, just kind of be wary of that if you want to make that last little minute go towards the finish. You'll have that downhill section, but then you've got to make that U-turn on the way back in. I think that's pretty much all I've got, Peter.
There's an extra couple of slides I've got here.
Sorry, I've got two other slides as I mentioned before. Okay, so for this one, just a little trick. If anyone's got some time at work and they're a bit bored on a computer, go onto Google Earth or download Google Earth, and you can trace the map, and you can actually get an elevation print of each of the courses. So that's what I've done here. So that's the bike sprint course. What I've done, I've just taken that from transition, and then I've taken that all the way up to the top end of Hyde Park just before that first turnaround. So you'll notice, again, the elevation's not really all that much different, you know, a couple of meters. That section there that I've got at the peak, just before that 9 meters, that's the turn going towards the Serpentine Bridge. And then down the bottom, you'll notice that's the elevation for the run course on the sprint. So again, as I say, not very high. On that standard distance elevation, the back end of the peak at that 5.42k mark, that's the turnaround next to the Tower Bridge. The bottom peak with that short little decline is the section as you'll go past the Charing Cross turn towards the Thames. But really, it's I wouldn't say it's a hilly course. It's relatively flat, and it's probably accentuated a little bit on the basis of the way that the elevation map has just come out from Google Earth. All right, so back onto the last slide, or next slide. So as I mentioned before, I recommend that everyone goes onto the website and download the information booklet. I know that Katie's already provided you a lot of information, but I'd recommend that you go onto the ITU website and have a good look at that as well.
Great.
So that's it from me, and happy to pass on to Katie if she's got any questions.
Great, Murray. Thanks very much, Murray. That's great. I wish I was doing it now.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. Fantastic, very comprehensive, and we're very lucky to have such a senior IT official like yourself having been exposed to the course to provide some great insights. So thank you. Just a couple of questions, mostly relating around wetsuits. Given the distance from the water into transition, are people allowed to take their wetsuits partially off, or would you recommend taking them fully off to make that journey from the water to transition?
I mean, you can take them partially off. Like you can take your wetsuit off over your shoulders, and and down to your waist, I should say. As you're moving, out of, I guess, from the pontoon towards the transition area, you must be continuously moving. You can't stop and then kind of take it off as such. So it's up to the individual in how you've done your racing in the past. But I mean, my personal recommendation is, and Kieran could probably comment on this as well, is that you do it as you're moving, either running or walking towards your bike, so that you're not wasting any time.
Yep. Thanks, Murray. Just to clarify, there's a couple of yes and no questions here. There are no other cobblestones on the bike course?
From my experience, there's no cobblestones, but again, I just kind of emphasise that red garnet that you'll notice on the course. Mostly, it's all around the Hyde Park region, rather than down along the Thames. But just keep your eye out for it, plus any full canopy tree areas.
The sprint bike course, question is in relation to whether that's close to the 20 kilometres or whether it's a little bit under or over. Are you aware of that, Murray?
That's a good question. I mean, it'll be dependent upon the ITU, when they get on site, they'll remeasure the course. So it'll be as close to 20 Ks as possible rather than under it. If anything, it might be a little bit over. So, it might be 20.3 or something like that. But it'll be dependent upon race organisers when they set up their venue. But it won't be 18 Ks, it won't be 21 Ks.
Okay, perfect. And just two final quick questions, Murray. Are there any restrictions on what colour towels or type of towels you can take into transition area?
There's no restriction other than they state that you can't mark the area, and Jackie might need to clarify this as well in terms of the rules. But what they may do, and it's dependent upon the conditions, is they'll actually provide carpeting for each of the age group zones, so that when you come into the transition, you just look for the colour carpet, and then you'll know which area or which row you get to go in, for wherever your bike might be racked in accordance to your age group. But there's generally no restriction. In previous age group world championships, they haven't had an issue with that. But yeah, in terms of the length of the towel, the width of the towel, there's generally no restriction upon that. But if it's something that is quite large and prominent, then someone may say something, because you're creating an unfair advantage.
And is there any restriction on what side of your bike you can set up your transition?
When they set up the course, and particularly the transition area, they generally allow 750 mil, so just short of a metre width per competitor. So again, that's kind of a logistics issue in terms of the number of bike racks that they provide. So you've got to be mindful that there's going to be a couple of thousand competitors, and they need to squeeze all of those in. It won't be like a Mooloolaba or a Noosa transition area, put it that way. You will be given some space, but you need to be mindful of some of the other athletes that are going to be there as well. But all of the racks, like, will have numbers on them. Like, you get a numbered and allocated position.
Fantastic, Murray. And one final question. In terms of the corral start for the swim, the athletes are corralled outside of the water and then move down onto the pontoon and into the water when they're correct, is it?
So I just missed the last half, that last bit of that question.
Sorry, Murray, it was just incorrect. In a question in relation to a corral start for the water, for the swim. The corralling of the athlete actually occurs outside of the water. That is correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there'll be roughly 3 stages. So they'll announce, like, the age groupers as they come in, and again, if you go onto the race info booklet, you'll see what the swim times are. So have yourself ready, a good half hour beforehand. But kind of take your time. There'll be plenty of areas to sit. Keep yourself kind of cool if the sun happens to be out. You can take some water with you and things like that. But generally, be ready at least half an hour beforehand so you can move into those corrals, and there'll be roughly three stages before you move onto the pontoon.
Excellent. Thanks, Murray, and thank you for everyone for posting questions. We haven't been able to get through all of them, but as mentioned before, we will have answers to your questions from Murray, and that'll be posted onto the website for you to have access to. So thank you, Murray, and Peter, we'll hand back to you.
Excellent work, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks very much indeed. Do keep your questions coming in. If you missed, I know there's a lot of information here. If you missed anything, don't worry. We are recording the webinar as well, so you'll be able to tune into the replay. Now, hopefully, fingers crossed, we have Mick Moroney on the line. Can you hear me, Mick?
I can, Pete. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. That's great. Mick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm probably the least technically competent person, so I apologise if you can't hear me or something goes wrong. This is my area is going to be nutrition tonight, and I'm going to take a unique approach to it, given I've done the last few World Championships, and each of them have been very unique, and they've all presented different challenges in terms of nutrition, and also a lot of the things that people have brought up tonight with regard to preparation and also travel and course requirements and those kinds of things. And I think the overarching thing that I've been listening to tonight is that you really need to remain open-minded with regard to what may or may not occur when you're there. It doesn't generally run 100% smoothly with everything that you've prepared in your mind and foresee, and you just got to kind of roll with the punches if things don't go your way with regard to whatever it is. And I think that's part of the whole process, and I do wish you all the best going to London. So talking about food, it's an interesting one. There's some races like last year in Auckland where, you know, you're only travelling across a ditch and food really isn't a big deal, and you're able to maintain the same kind of diet that you would normally have here in Australia, and that's a good thing. So London would be very similar in that you'll be able to probably purchase the same kind of foodstuffs that you would be used to here. And the first slide that I've got up there is probably the key thing, is that to just look at food as a fuel source and a nutritional source, and it's something that we do every day like breathe, and there is no need for you to upset whatever it is that you do in your normal eating practice and your food plan, given that you're going into a World Championship. And that's the key thing too, that you'll get there and you'll see the World Championship banners everywhere. And it does raise the heart rate a bit when you do see those kinds of things, and you see lots of people walking around. They all look super fit and they've all got nice coloured uniforms on. But essentially, it's only just another triathlon, and you are preparing for it, and you need to just do what you normally do. And that includes your normal food plan. We'll go to the next slide, Pete, please. So looking at how you would prepare for your race in terms of your carbohydrates, and obviously that's a fuel source. Kieran, as a high performance coach, embedded lots of nutrition into his tips, and it's important that he did, because it synthesizes the whole term of preparation. And carbohydrate loading is a term that was coined in the 60s and 70s, and people talk about it, and there's been a lot of turning around in terms of philosophy with regard to carbohydrate loading, especially for athletes that are just doing sprint and Olympic distance races. Essentially, you're only doing a race that's going to go for a maximum of, you know, an hour and 3 hours for the Olympic, generally speaking. And most of those calorie requirements can be utilised within your own glycogen and fat stores. And really, whatever it is that you're taking nutritionally is essentially a top-up. And if you're going into a race where you've prepared for up to 16 weeks of hard training, and then you're leading into a solid taper into an A race where you're spending up to 10 days winding down your training, then your body will essentially store itself based on the fact that your training requirements are up to 40% less than what they normally are. So you'll find yourself in a situation 48 hours prior to the race where you won't really need to do a whole lot of loading of your muscles, because they're going to be super loading anyway, based on the fact that your activity levels are a lot less than they normally are during your normal training requirements. So looking at it from that perspective, it's important that when you think about taper, you're talking about a training taper where you're dropping your training load, as Kieran alluded to, and also you're dropping and you're tapering your food as well. You're not eating the same kinds of calories that you would normally eat on a daily training environment. You're looking at reducing that slightly, decreasing your protein intake slightly because you're not looking at the same kind of muscle damage as you would on a normal training environment, but you're also looking at increasing your carbohydrates during that period of time. We go to the next slide, please, Peter. So there's essentially some information there about that whole process that I think is probably important for you guys to look at with your carbohydrates. Those are the things that are going to fuel you through the race. And when you're looking at going at threshold for an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours, which is what you'll be doing in the sprint and Olympic distance race, you'll be burning glycogen, carbohydrate, and those fats. And essentially your body can handle between 40 minutes to an hour of carbohydrate burning before it starts to deplete a little bit and we go into fat stores, but also supplementing that with the range of carbohydrate replacement gels and liquids that we have on the market, which I'm assuming we all have used in training, and those are the things that you'll be consuming during the race, but also making sure that you understand that your body is adequately fueled for the race. If you've completed your training in an adequate way, then certainly you don't really need to worry too much about your energy requirements. It's not going to be overly cold. You won't be burning extra calories to keep yourself warm like the athletes were in Auckland last year. It's more about looking at fueling yourself for your performance in a world championship. Next slide, please, Pete. So we've got a couple of equations there. If there's people out there that I'm not sure exactly how much to weigh up, if you're a numbers person, then certainly these numbers will help you. But if you're not a numbers person, then essentially go with your intuition, go with what you are used to, and just basically enter into the same kind of attitude to your diet that you normally would. Some of the research coming out of the AIS over the last year or so has indicated that the whole old school way of thinking that we spend the 48 hours prior to a race eating buckets of carbohydrates in the form of pasta and potatoes, that kind of has gone out the door now, given that the digestional upsets that we get from trying to digest great amounts of carbohydrate in that form can often be counterproductive. And many of the athletes now are carbohydrate form in terms of trying to top up the already existing stores they have in their muscles by just using sugar drinks like lemonade, Coca-Cola, things that are high in sugar, but also making sure that they're diluted enough with water to be acceptable into the body. But they will give you just as much of a performance enhancement in terms of your muscle stores as you would eating a whole loaf of bread without the digestional upset. So if you're thinking that you need that extra boost, don't go for the loaves of bread and the big bowls of pasta. Look for simple sugars that are going to go straight into your muscles, because your body doesn't know the difference. A trained muscle won't know the difference between complex and simple. It will just absorb the carbohydrates it needs to fill itself up. And certainly we don't do that on a general basis in terms of our health, but as an athlete preparing for an event, it's a good strategy to use to make sure that your muscles are full of carbohydrate leading into the race. Next slide, thanks, Peter. So your pre-race eating is an interesting one. Some people choose not to eat. Some people go through their normal processes of eating. The start times are relatively early, so you're looking at getting up probably a little bit earlier than you normally would on a normal training day. So preparing yourself for that is an important aspect of your preparation, making sure that you're used to getting up a little bit earlier and eating straight away and preparing for your race. You will have nervous energy. You may not sleep as well as you normally would the night before, so there is that added aspect of nervous energy that may burn energy. So you may need to eat something prior to the race. It is probably the best thing to do, is to have something very light 2 to 3 hours prior to your event. There's plenty of stuff on the market in terms of liquid meals out there, like Sustagens and Up and Goes, that fulfill that requirement. They have about 300 to 400 calories in them. They're easy to absorb. They digest quite quickly. If that's something that you're used to, then I suggest that you go with that routine. Some people are used to eating toast or muffins with a little bit of Vegemite. That's also a good strategy, or jam. You can go with that too, but something that is going to just stimulate your metabolism, get your body thinking that it's going in that normal routine where you're eating and then you're going to train or you're going to burn energy. It's going to get into that mode. It's going to release those hormones. It's going to get you into that mode where you're preparing for a physical effort. And often eating is the trigger for that. So if that's what you're doing on your normal training day, then certainly that would be a good route, extra couple of calories. If you stand around, certainly in the World Championships that I've done the last few years, you do stand around in a corral for quite some time. It can be up to half an hour, sometimes is there behind. And, you're going without any kind of supplement during that period of time. So it is important that you've had something to eat, because it may be a couple of hours before you're able to ingest anything on the bike. So to make sure that you've got something in your stomach that's slowly digesting and is going to be a slow release during the event is important for your overall performance in your race. Next slide, please, Peter. So then we're into the event itself, looking at eating and drinking during competition. Certainly, there's really not a need to eat any solid food during the race. Everything on the market these days is fluid-based and it can easily be consumed through fluid, and certainly that's a better way for your stomach to digest things and for you to get that immediate release of energy that you need for that race. So looking at complex carbohydrates in the form of an energy drink or in gels is important, but it's not a matter of going overboard with it. Certainly there's not a need to really think that you've got to overdo the energy on the bike, because it will inhibit your performance. If you've got too much going on in your stomach, it's going to draw the blood to your stomach and digestive system and take it away from the working muscles. You really on the bike, in the sprint race itself, you could really get all the energy you need through an energy drink. If you've got half a bidon or 3/4 of a bidon of an energy drink that's got 250 to 300 calories, that's going to be plenty to get you over the swim, through the bike, and get you to the end of the run with no problem at all. There'll certainly not be an energy deficit if you've got that amount of liquid in a bottle. In the Olympic distance race, those of you that are used to using gels, it's a good idea to take in a gel halfway through the bike. And certainly if you've got the same amount of energy in your bidon, 3/4 to a bottle, that's certainly enough energy needs to get you through, plus the stored carbohydrate that you've got on the bike. If you're one of those people that wants to take a gel with you in the run just as an insurance program, that might be a good placebo thing too. And if you do feel a little bit flat halfway through the run, it's not going to hurt to have that there anyway, just as a backup if you want that energy boost. And it may be something that you feel confident about, knowing that you've got that there just in case. So perhaps 2 gels, one on the bike and just one in the transition area that you pick up and you take with you on the run. If you need it, you need it. If you don't, you can just discard it. But certainly that will probably be enough during the course of the competition. If you go too far overboard and you take 2 or 3 gels and you're not getting enough water in to help digest it, that again is going to draw too much fluid away from the working muscles and into the gut to try and digest that, and that could cause problems like cramping and stitches. So to err on the side of minimalism with regard to energy consumption during the race is probably the best way to go. And if you're used to not training with them in an overbearing kind of way, it's probably the best way to go, is to just to take 1 gel on the Olympic distance race and then rely on liquids for the sprint race. Next slide, please, Peter. Yeah, so that slide certainly sums it up. And the last point in particular is about don't experiment. Use the same kind of energy product that you've been using in training. There'll be a myriad of things in the expo. At the World Championships, you'll see all this sort of stuff. You'll have spruikers telling you how wonderful things are, and they're going to give you a 20-second bonus per kilometre in the run, and just let all that pass through you and just stick to what you know, and that's the best way to go. Don't be bamboozled by the kind of marketing that you will see at a World Championships. It's there. People will tell you that it's going to make you faster, but just stick to your guns, and you can always try that later on. And certainly you don't want to be in the position where you've tried something for the first time and it's really upset your stomach and it's inhibited your performance, and you've gone all that way and you've stuffed it up just because you've taken the wrong kind of carb. So just keep that in mind, guys, and just keep the blinkers on while you're walking through the expo and listen to the stuff and take it in, but certainly don't experiment on the day. Next slide, please, Peter. So yeah, again, there's some stuff there about practicing. You know, we're down to the wire now in terms of a few weeks to go. It's probably important at this point to do lots of stuff in your training that is at race pace, and certainly ingesting carbohydrates on the bike is where you're going to be taking it all in. And it's not enough to just do a cruisy ride with a couple of friends and ingest. You know, you want to be looking at going at race pace. You know, having that out of breath kind of feeling, your heart rate's north of 150, 160, and then trying to take stuff in. So you're used to that feeling, your body's used to that feeling, and it's also used to taking in that energy and also using it, not just having it sit there as a knot in the middle of your diaphragm. Training your stomach is just as important as training your legs and arms, and it's really critical at this last point of your preparation that you get that right. If you are one of those people that needs to ingest energy during the race, you need to focus in on that with as much dedication as you do with your swim, bike, and running. Next slide, please, Peter. So just a couple of water stations. Some tips with that. Certainly the people doing the sprint distance race, you'll only have 5K, so you may get two water stations. I generally grab a couple of cups. I throw one over my head, and I also scrunch up the second cup in a kind of tight funnel, and then throw that down my mouth. I'm lucky to get 1 or 2 sips in before I choke, and that's enough, I suppose. It's probably, I'm not going to dehydrate during the course of an hour's race anyway, and most people won't. For the Olympic distance athletes, there's more of a consideration with hydration. Certainly take in some water. If you've got it, even if you have to just slow your pace down a tad so that you get that moment when you can actually ingest the water and then go on your way. You don't have to stop, certainly, but it's just that presence of mind to make sure the water is getting into your mouth in between breaths, and then you're on your way. You'll only need a couple of sips per aid station, and you're okay. You're not going to dehydrate. If you find cramps are coming on, it might be a good idea just to splash some water onto your legs, and just to ease the tightness in your legs, and it's also another placebo effect that may help you relax, and it may help the cramp to dissipate. And the last one there, Pete, the final slide. So looking at these final tips, guys, practice your race nutrition. I've said that, and I'll say it again, and I can't overstate the importance of doing that. It's just as important as your training to make sure that you train your stomach to ingest energy during the race, if that's what you're normally doing, in particular the Olympic distance athletes. In terms of sitting around and preparing for the race a few days out, there'll be minimal issues with food availability. You'll probably find there's everything that you want. The times that I've been in London, I certainly haven't gone without in terms of looking for things that I normally would eat. Go and do a big shop straight away. Don't just buy as you go. Think about 3 or 4 days in advance what you're going to need so that you can avoid the whole walking around thing and getting caught up in the moment where you're seeing other triathletes, you're talking too much, you're walking too much, you're getting hyper because so much is going on. You're looking at people from other countries. Try and avoid that a little bit. It is part of the whole game, but certainly you need to relax and spend time on your own and relax and with your friends. So do that big shop and get as much as you need for a few days so you can avoid that walking around. Stick to the foods you're used to. Don't experiment at the last minute. You know, if you see someone use something and they give you a tip about it, that's okay. You can try that for next time. But this time, you've done what you can, you've used what you used, and this is how you're going to prepare for the race. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you can move on and try something else. And finally, just with eating in, you will find you'll meet people and you'll get caught up in it. It's a very social environment. It's a wonderful experience. But try and avoid too many restaurant meals, going out too much, eating stuff that you're not used to. Just stay in a fair bit. Even go to restaurants when you can, but certainly before the race, you are there to do a job. You've trained really hard. You put a lot of dedication into it. You've spent a lot of money. You want to do well. You've got that focus. That's your goal. There is plenty of time afterwards to really enjoy yourself. So just make sure that you don't get caught up in all that kind of hype before the race. And I'm sure things will go really well. And that's enough from me, Peter. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Mick. Thanks very much indeed for that. We're going to move straight on, ladies and gentlemen. And before old Chad gets the final session here, please just hang in there. I know we're a little bit over time, Chad. But if you can just keep that in mind as we go, so we'd like to have a few questions at the end as well. Time for a couple of questions at the end, but we're going to go straight into Chad. Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks, Pete.
Excellent. It's all yours, Chad.
Thanks, mate. Hi, everyone. Yeah, don't want to take up too much.
Your sound's breaking up there, Chad. It sounds breaking up there a little bit, Chad. Can you hear me?
A long session, but just I might need to call in on my mobile then if that's going to continue.
That's a bit better now, Chad. That's a bit better now.
All right, it might be my internet connection. So if it gets bad, let me know. And I'll call in on my mobile. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. There's a lot to talk about in insurance. We do insurance seminars for Triathlon Australia, which can take a couple of hours. So I don't want to go into all that. But if we go on to the first slide, Pete, and we'll get onto it. Okay, so as members of Triathlon Australia, you are covered automatically when you're competing in events under the public liability and personal accident policy. Everyone travelling to the World Champs also has access to the travel insurance policy, which is really what I want to focus on. If you want to see some more information about the public liability and personal accident policies, jump on our insurance website, which is willis.com.au/Triathlon Australia. It's got quite a bit of information on there, and it'll be able to get you busy. Now, with regards to the travel insurance policy, you've got the normal benefits that you've got on any travel insurance policy you'd be used to. Your medical expenses, rental car waivers, your property and equipment to be aware of with regards to exclusions on this policy is the policy doesn't cover sporting equipment whilst in use, which is your bike, which we'll cover a little bit more of in a moment, and otherwise pre-existing injuries and illness, which most people would be aware of those sorts of things. Everyone should, I believe, have received an email with a summary of cover flyer, so that's going to give you a better those things to that extent, because you do have access to that. You've also got access to the full policy schedule and wording. You can get the summary of cover from our website and from Triathlon Australia's website. If we move on to the next slide, Pete. What I'm going to focus on is just some frequently asked questions when it comes to travel insurance. So, hopefully it will preempt some questions that people might already have, but if you've got more afterwards, that's fine. So a lot of what comes up is, what am I covered for whilst I'm training and competing? That's the idea of this insurance policy, because you can't get a policy off the shelf that will cover you for training and competing. So that's what we've arranged. There are a few variances when you're in competing mode compared to when you're not for the rest of your trip. Those are just there's capital benefits and weekly benefits if you're injured. So if you if you're severely injured and you can't work because of your injury, there's not slight difference in the travel policy in that if it's covered under the personal accident policy, which it would be if you're injured whilst you're competing, then
you're breaking up on us there. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
Travel policy, because
Chad, yeah, you were breaking
That's
up
all
on
right.
us there, Chad. I think we lost you for a second. So maybe Chad, a few of the key points, because your sound isn't great there. It's always a bit of sometimes a technical challenge.
Yeah, no problems at all. So, well, as you can see there, you've got some limited medical cover when you're competing, and just something to be slightly aware of is your personal liability whilst you're competing is covered under the public liability policy rather than the travel policy. So if you're walking down the street with an umbrella and you poke someone in the eye, that would be covered under the personal liability of your travel policy. But if whilst you're competing you were involved in something that somebody took action against you for your negligence, then the public liability policy would respond in that instance. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Pete? Okay, so some people want to know what if they injure somebody. That's what I was just talking about in relation to liability. So public liability and personal liability, they're both for the same thing. If you injure somebody and they take action against you for your negligence, or they allege that you were negligent, so that might be, you know, if you were in training mode and you knocked over a pedestrian and they got injured and had to go to hospital and all those sorts of things, that's what the liability portion of these insurance policies are there to protect you for. Next question is, what happens if I get sick? Well, that's the medical insurance cover. You are covered for sickness and disease, so you know, that's covered as well. And is your family covered? It's not. Not all of them, at least anyway. If you're travelling just with dependent children, then they're going to be covered under this policy. But if you're travelling with your spouse or other family members, they will need to take their own travel insurance. Next slide, Pete. Okay, so this is probably one of the most asked questions, and it's unfortunately often not asked until after something's happened. But you're travelling with your bikes, and obviously they are a pretty expensive asset that you own. Now, people do ask whether the travel policy will respond if their bike's damaged whilst they're travelling. Well, the answer is your bike is looked at as a baggage item from a travel policy's point of view. So if it is damaged by the airline, there is some cover there. However, there's a limit any one item of $2,500, which is, I would imagine, not going to cover most people's bikes. And when they think of any one item, a bike includes everything. It includes your wheels, and all of your other attachments. So it is something to be aware of, and we've got more information in the next slide about that. The other thing is your bike needs to actually go with you to be covered. It can't be couriered, it can't be sent with somebody else. It does need to be with you, travelling with you as a baggage item. And one point to note, if you do have damage done to your bike and it's the fault of the airline, you generally need to get the airline to, well, at least try and recover damages. It can be difficult, but try and recover damages from the airline for their negligence. So it's just a point there. With regards to, is your bike bag covered? Well, it's the similar sort of thing. Just like any other piece of luggage, yes, there's cover there up to the limit of $2,500. If you want to move on to the next slide. So this is the last slide, so it was all hopefully quick enough, and hopefully the sound problems weren't too bad. So is your bike covered whilst you're competing and training? It's not. As I mentioned before, sporting equipment is not covered whilst it's being used. And so the solution that we suggest in that area is like you'd insure your car, and many bikes are worth at least as much as cars. You look for a specialist insurance policy specifically for your bike from a company like BikeSure, which is a partner of Triathlon Australia's. There are a few others out there, but you do get a discount from what I understand if you take a policy with BikeSure. And they do have overseas extensions, and they will cover you for things like accidental damage whilst you're competing, up to the full limit and value of your bike. So it's something you might like to look into. Just a few other little points. That summary of cover brochure, if you take that along with you, because on the back of it, it does outline emergency assistant contacts, information on how to make a claim. If you've got that at hand, it's just a bit easier because you've got your policy number on there, and that way, if you do have an emergency and you do need medical assistance, you've got everything at hand to be able to make that as quick and that painless as possible, because they need to be able to track down which policy you're looking to claim under. The information that it's given on this and the information that's included in the summary is just that. It's a summary. It makes it a little bit easier to read, but we do recommend you have a look at the policy wording and schedule as well. But otherwise, that's it. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. It's not one of the most exciting subjects, insurance, but any questions, let me know.
No, that's fine, Chad. That's great. Thanks very much. We got through that. We had a few sound issues there, but hopefully that was fine for everybody. Thanks very much for that, Chad. Okay, Katie, I think you've unmuted yourself there. Have we got some questions and answers? Shall I unmute all the other panelists?
Yes, please. Thanks, Peter. Chad, thank you very much for that. Quick question for you, Chad. There's been a number of questions come in, so we won't have an opportunity to answer them all now. But I'll just go around and get people to answer, I guess, common themes that have come through. Chad, just one final one from you. Does the TA policy cover for public liability insurance in London?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to mention before. The travel policy refers to it as personal liability as opposed to public liability. It's just, I guess, really a terminology thing. But so yes, it does, is the short answer. But when you're actually competing, that personal liability under the travel policy won't respond. It will be the public liability policy that's held by TA that covers all members when they're competing in Australia or they're competing anywhere in the world for that matter.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Chad. Over to you, Mick. Mick, a couple of questions have come through on your thoughts on consumption of caffeine, particularly on the run leg. Have you sort of got any idea there, Mick, as to whether that's a good idea or not?
Oh, that's a good point, Katie. And caffeine is something that there's lots of research out there with regard to its performance-enhancing benefits in a legal way. And certainly there is some research that says that caffeine has a glycogen-sparing capacity to it, which would mean that if you do ingest caffeine, that it will turn your energy burning system more towards fat burning and spare the glycogen. I mean, it's not conclusive, but there is some evidence that occurs, and also the fact that caffeine is a stimulant and it increases your heart rate, so you can get up to those higher heart rates that are required in a race. Again, it's something that probably shouldn't be experimented with at the last minute. If you are used to ingesting caffeine through coffee, then your body's going to be used to it. If you're used to taking it in during physical exercise, then your body's going to be used to it. But if you are, what I normally do is I'm a coffee drinker. I'll have one coffee a day, and I'll try and reduce the amount of coffee that I have leading into a big event like that, and then drink coffee the morning of the race. And I find that I get a bit of a kick out of that. So that might be something that you could do or you could look at. But certainly there are some caffeine additives in some gels on the market out there that can be taken on board. And again, if you're used to that, then take them. But if you're not used to that, it might be something that you want to try the week leading into the race. And if you don't get any side effects and you feel that that might enhance your performance, then go for it. But certainly there really isn't any negativity with regard to caffeine. There is some research that said that it's a diuretic, that it forces your body to expel liquid water. That's inconclusive too, given that athletes tend to have their own kind of sweat outputs, and caffeine doesn't really make much of a difference to that. The average general population person does. But as I say, don't experiment, but it can be something that can be quite a positive. But don't think it's going to be a game breaker and you're going to go 5 minutes faster on the run. It's only going to be minimal if you do it at all. And if you weigh that up against trying something new during a big race, well, I would probably go against that if I hadn't used it before.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Kieran, over to you. Question about a new set of tyres. Athletes asked the question, I've got a new set, they're going to put them on this weekend and have a little bit of a burn around and do a few kilometres. The question is, do new tyres have less grip in the wet?
Oh, that all depends on the tyre itself. No is the short answer. It shouldn't. And, unless you're using slicks or tyres with very little tread, then no, that shouldn't be an issue. As long as you do have a ride on it beforehand, it'll be fine.
Excellent. And Kieran, just on that as well, in terms of the preparation, the flight preparation, a couple of people are obviously flying in the evening and not in the morning. The advice that you provided would remain the same for people travelling in the evening, or is there any sort of additional elements that you would need to think about?
Yeah, the big thing is just to get into that time pattern as quickly as possible. So try and from the time you get on the plane, try and set your time, your body clock to be operating on London time as much as possible. So you want to get the biggest chunk of your sleep in that 30 hours or however long the flight's going to be at night time in Europe. So you've got to try and manipulate things so that you're moving to that time.
Excellent. Thank you, Kieran. And Murray, just a final question for you. As you double up as our race course expert as well as an ITU international TO, question about gels. Is there any restrictions in where gels can be placed, i.e. in the race belt?
No, there's no restrictions at all. You can have them with you for the full duration of the event. If you're having to tuck them in somewhere during the swim, you can do that. You can place them on your bike. There's no restriction at all.
Excellent. Thank you, Murray. Well, just in the interest of time, I do apologise. We've gone a little bit over, but hopefully that those few extra minutes were certainly worthwhile with the fabulous information that's been provided tonight. So can I just say to the panellists, thank you so much for putting together this presentation and taking the time to prepare and deliver it. You've certainly provided a wealth of information. To all our attendees and our Team Australia, thanks very much for supporting this webinar, guys, and I hope that you certainly have received a lot from it. Peter, thank you very much for hosting this. Really appreciate your support in this, and as I mentioned, we'll have this up on the website, the actual session, recorded session, along with the questions that have been posted and the answers to them. I'm now going to hand over to Peter, who will officially do a quick poll before we end the session. Thanks, right. Peter.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks very much, everybody. Just hang in there. Thanks for everybody for hanging on. Great stuff. I want to do a quick poll, some audience participation here. I'm going to launch the poll right now, and it asks a very simple question. did you find this format as a webinar useful or not? You can vote directly on the screen by clicking on the screen buttons there. So when everybody's voted, just click on the screen. It's a bit of a loaded question, I know, but we'll ask it anyway. And we've got about 75% of people voted so far. I'll give it a few more seconds if you can vote on the screen. If you didn't find it that useful format, just please tell us. But we just want to see how many sort of people supported this kind of format as a webinar, and I think it'd be useful to have some in the future. So we've got about 80% at the moment voted. Give a few more seconds. There may be some of you on iPads who I believe can't vote on an iPad. We found out the other day, but if you can just give us your vote now, I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay, and I think our panelists are not able to vote as well, but I'm going to close it there. We got about 81% voted so far. We had about 100 people at its peak at this webinar, which is fantastic. I'm going to share the results. How about that? That was very scientific. 100% said yes, good, excellent. Yeah, that was a real relief. So thanks everybody for doing that. Like Katie said, we have recorded the webinar, and the materials will be available for you afterwards as well. So thanks very much everybody for your attendance. This is Peter Downs, and we're going to close the webinar off right there. Thank you.
You still there, Peter?
Yes, I am, but people still hear us here, so I'll just mute you there for a second until people log off.
Still on, Peter?
Hello. Yes, I think everyone's offline now. Well done, guys.
Thank you.
Good work.
Sorry about my sound. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Sometimes. What are you? Where are you? Whereabouts are you, Chad?
Geographically, or
Yeah,
I'm just at
geographically.
home
Sorry. Yeah.
in Manly.
Okay. It should be okay.
Manly, Sydney.
Yeah.
I actually think I found that my mic's oversensitive because when I talked quieter, it stopped redlining, and it was when I was closer to my mic and speaking louder that it seemed to redline, and I wonder whether it's actually the program that cut it out to. Anyway, not sure.
Yeah, maybe. Sometimes you're not on wireless or something like that, are you?
I am. Yeah, I'm on a wireless thing.
Sometimes wireless isn't so good, isn't so great as a landline sort of thing. But yeah, no, he got through it okay. It's good.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure if is Katie still there.
No, she's hung up.
She's hung up. Okay. All right, good work, guys. I think we'll close it down there. Thanks very much, and yep, good work.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheerio.